Entering the 1995 season, expectations were pretty high for the New York Giants. In their first 2 seasons under head coach Dan Reeves, they finished with a winning record. They made it to the postseason in 1993 as Reeves won Coach of the Year honors, and they won their final 6 games of the 1994 season. They were entering 1995 on a relatively high note, and now the offense, which already had a 1,000-yard rusher in Rodney Hampton, was going to be bolstered even more by the addition of Tyrone Wheatley in the first round of the draft and Herschel Walker in free agency. Plus, Dave Brown had to break out eventually, right? Instead, the season was quickly collapsing on them. After 9 games, the Giants were sitting at 3-6, having lost their last game in heartbreaking fashion to the Seattle Seahawks by a final score of 30-28 after kicker Brad Delwiso missed a field goal wide right. This was the biggest kick in Giants history that went wide right. Their season was not over by any means. They were only 2 out of a playoff spot, and as we would later find out, the Detroit Lions made the playoffs that year after starting 3-6. Plus, the Giants were 3-7 the year before, and wound up fighting for a playoff spot before missing out to Chicago on a common opponent's tiebreaker. They still had a shot, but time was running out. They had to win their game against the Oakland Raiders to keep their playoff hopes alive. Instead, they lost 17-13, and the play that changed the entire game? One of the most controversial calls of the 1995 season. This is the story of the call that ended New York's disappointing 1995 campaign. Since we went over all the context, let's just dive straight into the situation. It's the 4th quarter, and after the Raiders started off with the first 10 points of the game, New York scored 13 unanswered. The Giants are leading 13-10, and after Dave Brown decides to throw a pass behind the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 9 for some reason, New York punts the ball away. Oakland drives down the field, and now they're facing a 3rd and 6. Jeff Hostetler, in his return to New York, takes the snap and takes off running. He picks up 5 yards. He's 1 yard short. Except it's ruled a first down because of this call right here. Unnecessary roughness on Giants cornerback Phillippi Sparks. 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down. And now instead of settling for a field goal to tie the game, Oakland is deep in the red zone looking to win it. On the replays, this doesn't look like much of anything at all. Sparks barely touches Hostetler, and Sparks is going in for the tackle the moment that Hostetler begins to slide. It seems pretty simultaneous. And there's some debate about whether or not Sparks even touched Hostetler's helmet on the play, as the angle indicates that it may have been a tap on the shoulder more than anything else. I freeze the moment that Sparks goes in to tackle Hostetler, and it could be argued that Hostetler hadn't even begun his slide yet. Plus, look at where the flag comes from. It doesn't come from the line judge that's standing right next to the play. It comes from an official standing 20 yards away from the play in the end zone. 2 plays later, the Raiders scored the game-winning touchdown, winning it 17-13, and essentially knocking the Giants out of any playoff discussion. Naturally, after the game, Reeves was pretty upset about the call. He thought it was a bad call, saying that the guy who had the best view did not throw the flag. The guy with the worst view did. While he had no problem with the rule protecting the quarterback when he's sliding, he didn't know what else Sparks could have done in that situation. He added, when you look at something, you try and tell him what he did wrong. When you look at something, you try and correct it. I honestly can't tell him in that situation that he did anything wrong. He sees him start sliding, and he does use restraint. You see situations in the game where guys do a lot worse than that and aren't called. And Sparks was upset, saying he wasn't trying to hurt him, and that he couldn't believe that they called it. Obviously, Hostetler thought it was the right call. He said that Sparks hit his head, and that Hostetler rarely slides because of plays like this, where you open yourself up. And remember, there was no instant replay back in 1995, but even if there was, plays like this would not be reviewable. It was a questionable call that went against the Giants at just about the worst possible time. Any sparks they had at a possible playoff push died with this call. Special thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.